Hey guys, it's Lisa and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be making over some items to go in a vignette, and I'm going to start with this cabinet door and basket. I've already glued some molds that I made up ahead of time on to go on this cabinet door. I thought that I had recorded that, but my camera wasn't on when I thought it was. So I just took some of those molds, some of my molds, and glued them, some of my furniture molds actually, and glued them to this cabinet door. Now, if you don't want to use clay molds for this, you can buy just wood pieces that you can embellish your furniture with, and you could use those instead. Or you can make this without any molds at all. But I just wanted to dress it up a little bit, so I just added a few to mine. And then I'm just painting this with 2 coats of the color Caviar, which is just a dull black. And that's a Dixie Belle color. I'm not sponsored by anyone, but I do sell Dixie Belle in my store locally. So that's why I tend to use Dixie Belle colors more often. And I don't bother painting the back of this because it's going to go against the wall. But I give it a couple coats of the Caviar, and then I let it dry well. And then, because I want these molds to stand out, I'm going to put white wax on the entire piece. And that white wax will just kind of settle into all those details and make them really pop. Now, instead of these molds, you could also just leave this black and do some stencils in white if you have stencils but don't have clay molds. Now, I did mention that I did put a little sawtooth hanger on the back of this. And then it was ready to add the basket, except that the basket, when I thrifted it, was already white, but I wanted to freshen that white up, so I gave it a coat of the color Cotton from Dixie Belle, and then I went over it with a clear wax just to seal it in well. And now I'm just kind of cutting a strip of an old lace curtain, and I'm just going to tie that around this basket. And I started out with a bow, and I do decide later that bow is not exactly what I wanted, and so I decide to untie the bow and just let the strings hang. And because I'm going to add some transfers to this basket, I decide later that it just needed something else. And so untying that bow just gave me more room to show for the transfers to show. And here I'm just kind of lining this up with the bottom of this cabinet door, and I'm going to attach it with a couple of screws. Now here I wanted screws that were large enough. I think I used about 1 inch. I wanted them to be long enough to go through the basket and grab the wood well enough, but not so long that they come through the back. So just a couple of screws was enough to hold this in place well. And it's not going to have a whole lot of weight in it because we're just going to do some faux florals. So once that was secure, I didn't even worry with using any floral foam. I just started placing some flowers in here. That way, when I get tired of whatever is in there, or whoever buys this gets tired of what's in there, then they can just pull it out and put something else in. And now I chose here to use these blue hydrangeas because those are the colors in my vignette. But after using this, I wasn't crazy about how that blue looked in this arrangement. So I decided to take them out and put something more neutral in. So when I do the finished product, that's why it looks different, is because I did take these out and replace them. And like I said, I also decided that this basket needed a little more. So the transfers that I used in my last video, some of those that I talked about my friend Paula bringing me. I decided to use some more of those. And with this basket, I literally just used scraps from that, and not necessarily scraps, but just little pieces. And that is what I'm learning about these transfers. Although I'm reluctant to spend what they cost, there is a lot in them. And you can just kind of you could just kind of take them apart and just use pieces of it on some of your smaller projects. And the main thing is just to make sure that what you use them in is something that you can get a little more money back on. And if you use them on smaller items, just make sure it's just little bits and pieces. So you can be frugal with even the transfers. So now I decide to use just one line of French wording, and I don't know what the French wording says, but I'm pretty sure that one of these words has something to do with flowers. So I'm just going to put that on there, and if it doesn't, no big deal, but I feel like it does. And it just happened to fit around this top. So one thing that I did learn with these transfers is when you're transferring onto a basket, especially a basket like this, it's very difficult to get this transfer on. Now, I may have hurt myself also that I put the white wax on, and I wouldn't have put it on first, or the clear wax. I wouldn't have put it on first, except that I wasn't really planning on using transfers on this. So it was a little tedious and a little time consuming, but I did manage to get this on here. And I will say that it wasn't perfect, but I didn't mind that it was a little bit off, because that just kind of adds to the distressed look, I guess. So you just have to really put some pressure on it, and this takes a little time with this basket. But I had already started it and wasted it if I didn't use it, so I just kind of saw this through, and even decided to add another piece of the transfer on the bottom of this basket. And I end up liking how this turns out, especially with those neutral flowers. And now I'm going to make over this little stool to fit into that same vignette. So I clear coat this because it's almost doesn't have any kind of gloss on it. So I knew that there might be some bleeding issues. So I just sprayed it with clear coat and then put the color Cotton on this. And even in spraying this with clear coat, I still got some bleeding on those legs, so I had to spray them some more. But then eventually I got it to cover, and it did take 2 coats, but that was mostly because of the bleeding. I like the size of this little stool because it's one that can be used easily as a riser. And I like having those in the store because it helps me kind of add layers to my vignettes. And so like I said, this one was just really a good size. I think it's like a little milking stool or something that mimics a milking stool. So once this stool is dry, then it's ready for the next step, and I decided to use some of those same transfers that my friend brought in and put those on this little stool. So I just took another couple of little parts from that transfer, and I'm just going to rub those onto the top of this. And because this is such a smooth surface, it went really well, and I hadn't waxed this piece or anything, so this transferred really well. So I just kind of cut some parts from that transfer that a couple of parts that I felt like would go well together and fit the top of this stool. There was no other reason why I used those, just mainly that they'll fit, and I was really happy with how this turned out. And as I'm told that when you finish putting these transfers on, you take that plastic and wipe it down, and that's supposed to help it stay on somehow. And now I'm just going over the whole stool with some sandpaper and doing some light distressing. I also went over that transfer. But I really liked how this little stool turned out. Now, I forgot to take a before picture of the next item, but it was just this little letter thing here. I'm showing you the finished product, actually. It was just brown. It was just the wood color, and I think it had some writing on the front of it. But I just took it outside, and I had to give it a good coat of white spray paint. And the reason I had to do that was because deep down in these pockets, there was just no way to get my brush. And I still went down in the pocket some when I went back over it with chalk paint, because I didn't want to leave that finish from the spray paint. But it was still a struggle to get down in there, so you pretty much have to use spray paint on this one. So all I'm doing on this one is just painting it white, and now I'm using my my IOD stamps, and these are the crockery stamps. And this is another stamp that I use and use. They just work so well for so many items, but I'm just going to pick a few different ones of them and put on these little boxes. And I thought about putting numbers on them, but I feel like numbers are kind of overused, and I don't really see the purpose anyway. So I just decided here to put these little crockery stamps on. And this is going to be a really quick flip. The hardest thing about this one is just getting that paint down in those pockets well. But the rest is going really quickly. And I think this is going to make a really big difference. And I don't know about you guys, but I see these at thrift stores all the time. Then when I get finished with all the stamps, then I'll just give this a little distressing with some sandpaper, and then I'll finish it off with a clear wax, and then this will be finished. And if you don't want to use the clear wax on this, then you can always use just some sort of a clear coat. You could use a spray clear coat or brush on some polyacrylic. But I like to use the wax because I like the feel that it gives these items, and also it's very easy, and the cleanup is easy. And also what I like about the waxes is there's no odor. And then this is the last item. And I know this was a shorter video, but I just had a little small vignette that I needed to finish. And now I'll just use the rest of the video just kind of showing you through that little vignette and letting you see these items up close. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next. Thank you so much for watching, and God bless you and your family.